Welcome to USA Football's Coach and Coordinator Podcast, where top football coaches from around the country share their stories, philosophies, concepts, and strategies to help you get better on and off the field. Now, here's your host, Keith Grabowski.
Hey, coaches, before we get going today, I just wanted to thank you for all you've been doing to support this podcast. And we have an incredible lineup coming up here. We have just about every major college conference represented. We have a ton of FBS coaches, Division II coaches, Division III coaches, some great high school football coaches coming on the podcast to share with you and help you grow professionally during this time. I really appreciate all of you asking your questions on Twitter. Please follow me at Coach K. Grabowski for our daily updates on our guests and your opportunity to ask questions. We will read them on the show and attribute those to you. So please contribute to the show as much as you can. I also want to talk to you a little bit about our football development model, which is something we've rolled out here at USA Football. And this is really for you to be able to help your youth football programs develop. It's about a long-term athlete development plan. It's something that comes off of the American development model, which is something that the USOC has put together. The idea is that we're able to teach skills in a progression starting at the youngest ages. We're also looking at the different game types we have, whether that's flag, which is non-contact, limited contact games like padded flag or tackle bar, and full contact, and the right progressions for contact teaching there as well. Be sure to check out all we do at footballdevelopment.com and check out what we're doing with the FDM, the football development model, at usafootball.com/FDM. usafootball.com. On today's podcast, we focus on what an FBS offensive line coach looks for when recruiting offensive linemen. We talk about culture shift and what helps bring a program to success. And then most importantly, for you young coaches out there who are looking to climb the ladder and make it to the next level, or some of you older coaches as well, we talk about perseverance. And joining me on the podcast again for the second time is the offensive line coach at Tulane, Cody Kennedy. Cody, always great to talk ball with you.
Absolutely, Coach. Great to be back on here. And, great podcast you got for all the guys in the sport of football. And it really, provides a lot of great information for guys across the country.
I appreciate that, Coach. A topic, we may have touched on a few times here on the podcast. I know when we first did this, Herb Hand mentioned some of these things, but it's always good to hear the different perspectives out there. And especially, someone like you, Cody, one of the youngest offensive line coaches in the country right now at your level, what you look for when you're recruiting an offensive lineman. And I'm sure it's not just always the measurables that you can see on a piece of paper. Certainly some of the things that you're going to see on tape, but I imagine there's going to be things you see and that you look for off the field as well. So Cody, I guess give us an overview of your approach to recruiting offensive linemen.
I guess just turning on the tape, initially turning on, at first we go through and watch the initial huddle highlight of a guy, some things and obviously down the road you get further into watching games, but the initial pop of a guy, some crucial things that I look at is initial ball get off. How quick are they getting out of their stance athletically, how they move, and making sure there's not any lag there and being twitched up is what I would say. So that really shows a lot of ability. The second thing would be the ability to bend, okay, and create what I call create power out of their hips, okay? Are they unlocking their hips to drive through a guy? How is that hip angle changing? Do they look good in their stance, comfortable in their stance? Is there any negatives to that? Obviously another overlooked thing is kind of how much of an overall athlete they are. A lot of times you can tell by the way guys get up off the ground. It's kind of a thing I look at, kind of a weird, quirky thing to look at, but how they get off the ground, how athletic they look, moving. And, if they're rolling around looking like me getting off the couch, it's probably not a good deal. But if they can pop up off the ground and recover off of a block, that's a good situation. And the overall effort is huge for me. Everybody wants to look at, the intangibles of, their frame and, different things like that, prototype frame. Everybody wants a big, tall, long guy that, can run around and move people. But effort can cover up a lot of that. So as we're watching, the ability to finish and also strike guys. And I think there's two types of players in the game. There's guys that think about hitting somebody, and there's guys that run through people. I'm looking for hitters, guys that run through people on contact and can really create that force. Another thing you look at really is their ability to play with their full foot in the ground. A lot of guys these days in the offensive line world are talking about playing on your full foot and creating power through the ground, which creates power through the man. That comes with playing through your insteps or your full foot. And some guys are able to move and be an athlete in that position. Other guys are really on their toes, and it's really an unstable ground for those guys to operate. So those are just some smaller things. Obviously, some things I like to see is, their grip strength and their ability to finish through and maintain sustain blocks. It's one thing to just hammer a guy and hit them. It's another thing to sustain that force and really drive through a guy. So those are some little things I'll watch on the initial highlight. Once we start getting serious on those guys and once they pop through their initial highlight, we'll pull up about 3 games from their high school career and make sure those highlights that we're seeing also copy and paste over to game activities. And that's really a chance to see their effort and see if they're a football player or not. See if they get excited about playing football and, are really in tune with the game and show some passion out there. So that's kind of the way we work as far as, in my eyes, looking for the next players for the Green Wave.
Yeah. Some interesting things there. And I'm wondering, the multi-sport approach to these things. So when you are looking at twitchiness or you're looking at, a guy's ability to bend, a guy being able to have balance, those kinds of things, just thinking through some of these sports that these bigger guys play. Basketball, I think, is always a good one. You could see a lot there. Certainly wrestling and guys who throw shot, right? I mean, those guys who are going to do some things there, they have to be able to both have some technique, but also be explosive in how they do things. How much do you weigh what these guys do? And is there any way you get to see some of the highlights of what those guys do in other sports?
No, I think it's 100% true. Anytime those guys can play multiple sports, it's a positive for me as a coach because, number one, it's another place to evaluate their movements and putting them in a different area to really see how they react to change of direction and things like that. And you hit on the 3 sports we really factor in with the big boys. You got the wrestling where you can really see a lot of leverage and a lot of hip power created in those matches. And you really get guys that understand body mechanics and leverage and angles. Those are, it's a great deal for those guys that are big-time wrestlers, and I really like recruiting those guys. Basketball in the hardwood, man, they're having to run, they're having to change directions, they're having to break down, bend, guard. You can see a lot of things in those things, and then the throwers in track, man, coming out of your hips, creating a lot of power in a short space is huge. So those 3 sports, man, I love guys that are multiple sport guys. It just shows at the end of the day that, man, they're a natural athlete. And that's what you want out there, especially at the collegiate level, at the FBS level, are guys that are just ball players, man. No matter what season, sport it is, they're competitive. They want to do great. They want to compete year-round and get after it. So I think that's a huge evaluation tool for us. And, it really goes a long way for those guys, especially when you get down to the end and you're really splitting hairs. Maybe you've only got a couple spots left. And now that gives us another evaluation tool that we may not have with another guy. So it doesn't rule out those single sport guys, but it shows a lot if you are a multi-sport guy.
Yeah, that's a great point there. So, Coach, you got some of those measurables. You got the on-field stuff. You're looking at their athleticism, both in football, other sports, and that probably now puts you in the place where you're going to recruit this guy and get to know him and build that relationship. So things you're looking for then as far as character and the right fit for you guys and what you're doing. We're going to talk about your culture there at Tulane and how they fit in it. But, the fit in recruiting as you start to, again, figure out who are the guys you're going to offer.
Yeah, I think initially talking to the guy, Tulane is a top 40 academic institution in the country. So that has to play a part initially. The prospect recruit has to really have an engaged viewpoint on academics and really have a plan for that, because rolling into our institution, you really got to get excited about it. And the classroom's going to be tough here. And it's not something that shy recruits away. It's something that where we're able to fit that niche for a lot of different prospects across the country who have a look at the 40-year plan and not the 4-year plan. So I think that's a first, when I lay the groundwork and initial conversation, we're talking about academics, because you have to, because it's a foundation of what we're built on as a program as well as an institution. From there, I like guys that love football. I want to ask them questions about the NFL. I want to ask them about who their favorite team is, what their dream school was growing up, different things like that, that just give me, how serious is this guy about football? How much does he love football? What's his passion level like? So just going into that, and obviously when you're recruiting a guy, you gotta be natural. Guys, these prospects and recruits are really smart guys, and if you're putting on a dog and pony show for them, they're going to see through that. So I make sure it's a relaxed setting, so we're able to communicate and really get some real information out there and get some real questions asked. And then you want to really decide who they're going to lean on to make a decision. Who's that person going to be? Is it a grandparent? Is it a parent? Is it an older brother? Who kind of is their point in who they're going to bounce this information off of to find out what's a good fit for them? Because that's going to let you know who the next relationship you need to build in the recruiting process is. So those are some just initial things I like to find out about the kid. Obviously you want to know about their family and kind of their upbringing, how they got to football. One thing is, you see a lot of these guys, we were talking about multi-sport athletes, you may see a kid that looks, on tape like he's got a prototype frame, but he may be a little bit raw. You got to find out how many years he's played football, and find out his history within the sport and other sports in that initial conversation. So those are some open talking points in the first conversation I like to get to with those guys. Obviously it builds a lot deeper from there, but just initially we got to make sure the academics are in line, the passion is there, and then the history of, whether it's with their family or with the sport, knock out those as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I got to ask this one. Being a younger guy, I'm sure you're into social media. We've heard all kinds of nightmare stories about kids and their social media and, kind of knocking them out of recruiting. And how much are you looking at social media, or how important is it that, this guy says and at least in some of the things he shares, does the right things when it comes to how he's portraying himself in public?
Man, I think it's a deal breaker because it shows maturity. Are you able to control that social media? And I listened to Coach Shaw, I believe, from Stanford, speak about it, and he had a great line. He said, social media should be a running commercial of how great your life is, and really just a positive outlook and a positive impact on people around you. And, it's hard for some of these kids because it plays such a role within their society. Like you said, I'm a young guy, so I understand that. I understand the role that social media plays, but also the ability to control what's put out there and what really impacts your brand, because everybody has a brand at the end of the day. Brands aren't just for businesses. Brands are for people. And what you're putting out on social media determines what your brand is, and really puts the label on the package per se, and I think it really impacts a kid, whether he feels like it's a big deal or not, if it's all even, like what we said, and it will get to that late in the recruiting process where there's a fork in the road where you've got to really, go after one kid or the other. That all makes a difference in the end. And it may seem like such a little trivial deal for a high school junior or senior, but it plays, a major part in a lot of people's viewpoint of them and their maturity level and ability to control that. So I think it's huge, man. It plays a lot bigger role than what these high school guys really understand. So I think it's always good to monitor that. I know we here at our place, we're constantly keeping tabs on them, and I get an update to my phone anytime one of my guys tweets, because they're representing me now. We're all on the same team. We're all part of the same thing. So if they're throwing something out there, I want that. It's just like it's representing me. So just a rule of thumb, if you wouldn't tweet it in front of your mom, in front of your parents, then you probably don't need to be tweeting it out. And, that's kind of my general rule, even for myself. You got to be smart out there because you can literally post whatever you want to. And that's the beauty of it. But it's also the horror of it, if you use it in a bad way.
Yeah, really good points there. And this kind of then dovetails with the next part of this, that culture shift at Tulane. So you do have to have the right guys, right? The guys who you can't count on. You're not going to bring them in recruiting, so that's an important part of it. But talk to us about, what you guys have been able to do under Coach Fritz's leadership.
It's been an unreal transformation. I've obviously only been here for 1 year, but to see the way he operates a program is unreal. He does a phenomenal job. He's done a phenomenal job at every level. He's one of the top 4 most winningest college coaches in the country. So for a young guy to be in the room with him and to see how he interacts and handles situations on a day-to-day basis, it's just like a leadership workshop every day. You're taking notes, how he handles different things, especially among these times. And, the real true leaders, show up. And he's been able to do that. We're first time we've won back-to-back bowl games in school history. And to just see it at a program that has not had the most storied past as of late, as far as winning football games, to see that transition. And it's really, truly a testament to our kids within our program as well, and our recruiting department for getting the right guys in here. And like I said, earlier we touched on the academics, but character is a huge deal. And our kids, they have to want to come to Tulane to be legendary, really, and to change the tide of our program. And we're trying to set new heights and win an American Conference championship here. And those guys got to really be, focused in on that. But just the day-to-day, the enthusiasm he has as a head coach is something that's truly infectious and something I'll take into my, I take into my day-to-day activity right now. But, further in the future, if I'm blessed enough to be a head coach one day, every day you catch him. And he's fired up and he's trying to make guys better. One thing that he does that I think's phenomenal and also builds our culture is he's always involved in position meetings. Okay. He may pop in and sit in your position meeting and he's taking notes just like one of the kids would. So he's got notes for you. He's got, and he's going to critique you. We're all grown men. You got to be able to take, some constructive criticism and build on that. And sometimes that's what I think young guys struggle with, is the ability to take that and still be positive. And Coach Fritz does a phenomenal job at making sure all our coaches are on the same page with that. And he's really, man, he's a master coach, and it's been really a joy to work for him. And not that, I think there's a fine line of micromanaging and kind of being negative with it. And there's a side of it where where he's involved with every facet of the program, because that's what represents him. And he wants to be a winner. And I think he's very, very much so on the positive side of it. And he wakes up every day on fire. And that, in turn, leads to our program and our kids waking up every day on fire to try and go win games and really just be the best person you can be. Because, like I said, at Tulane, you're going to have to be elite at practice, and you're going to have to be elite in the classroom. So it's a full day of trying to hit the highest mark we can as a human being. So Coach really does a good job at, encompassing that, we got to be great people here. So I think that leads to a great culture. And, I'm learning something new every day with him. And to be a young guy under a seasoned vet is really, it's a learning on a daily basis.
Coach, I know for you, a lot of this in this profession has been about having the right attitude, been about having energy, and sticking with it, persevering. It's given you the opportunity to do this at the highest level. We talked a little bit about this, in your start in coaching on the last podcast, but, I think it's a great message and something good to relay to our especially our younger coaches out there right now. Talk to us a little bit about, your personal journey and the perseverance it's taken you to get to where you're at.
Yeah, I think perseverance is kind of a key term for it all. I had gotten to the point where I had GA'd and then gotten, some head jobs at the Division II level. I was at the UNC Pembroke for my first full-time job, which is Division II in Pembroke, North Carolina. And then got back with Coach Hall, who's our offensive coordinator here at Tulane. He hired me back at the University of West Georgia as the offensive line coach, and then was there for 2 years. Coach Hall ended up getting another job, and I had a situation where I wanted to get to the FBS level. And, with that, took a step back from being a full-time Division II coach and was a graduate assistant for 4 months at FAU under Coach Kiffin down there, and then was blessed to get a call from Coach Pittman at the University of Georgia, and actually went through a fall at the University of Georgia under Coach Smart and Coach Pittman there. And it was just a blessing in my coaching career because I had to step back. I went from running my own room. I went from doing, all the daily tasks of a full-time offensive line coach to now back to the bottom rung of the ladder. And there is some scary times to it and some unknowns to it. But I think it really sculpted my career as a coach and put me back on the level of, you're able to, do some things and really step back and take some notes from some of the best in the game with Coach Smart and Coach Pittman being there and really learn how an SEC primetime program is run. So just the perseverance aspect of, taking chances as a young guy, obviously it paid off pretty well for me, but the ability to persevere through those tough times, it wasn't always the easiest going back in the career progression to get to where I'm at. But, there were some bad days and some really, really good days. But that's one thing for the younger guys in the profession is you always got to – you've got to stay on the grind. You got to persevere. And every day is a job interview. Somebody is judging how you do an activity every day. That may be another assistant coach. That may be another graduate assistant. But every day is a job interview. And if you can attack it like that, then I think it gives you the motivation to be honed in on the details and really hit new levels within, your coaching career, focusing on those details and really rolling around with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder to try and be the best coach you can be and really absorb all this information. Because when you're a young guy, information's all around you. Whether you stop to take it in is your choice, but you can learn the right way to do things and just as easily as you can learn the wrong way to do things and things you can take notes at with how people attack those issues every day. So I think that's one thing as a young guy, if I could pass along information, that's one thing, man. Keep working, keep grinding. Every day's a job interview and every task is important.
So, Cody, to tie things up, now we haven't been able to talk too much ball with you in the last one. We talked about preparing for training camp. This time we've hit on some different things. I'll tell you, let's focus on your favorite play. What's something you really love to teach?
My favorite play and my baby at the moment would be the duo play. You see guys chirping on it on Twitter and, obviously one of the top run plays in the NFL. It was actually one of our best plays this year down here at Tulane, and it's powered, no puller. And, you'll hear guys talk about it different ways. And I really like the play because there's a lot of, intrigue about it within the coaching world. And we've been running it for quite a few years now and it's paid dividends for us. And whenever it's a short yardage situation, I'm usually screaming for it down on the other sideline. So it seems to be my baby of sorts these days.
It's definitely one that's being talked about, Coach. If you could, I guess, coach us through some, I know we don't have anything to draw up here, but coach us through some of the key coaching points that you go over as you're installing this.
I think the key coaching points are your double teams within, the duo play. That's kind of how the play got its name, is you're trying to sculpt two double teams along the offensive line, whether that's tight end tackle, guard tackle, center backside guard. You're trying to get those double teams piercing and denting the defense going vertical. Okay. And how I teach those gap scheme double teams and go through those are really a passion of mine. I've met with quite a few high school guys on Zoom this week, just talking through it. And, I think it's a good downhill hitting run. Our running backs love it. And it's really a play that it's a tried and true play because I think it's good versus movement, and also a safe play versus blitzers trying to penetrate those A and B gaps with A and B gap blitzes. And, it's an attitude play for us. Our guys believe in our double teams, getting 600 pounds on 300 pounds and really trying to dent the defense going vertical. And my O-line, anytime you got a play where the O-line gets fired up and the running back gets fired up when it's called, you're usually cooking with gas. So that's probably why it's one of my favorites, because it is an attitude play for us.
So I know in watching social media, guys will throw up a play and debate. Was this tight zone? Was this, duo? First of all, help us end that conversation. How do you delineate what play that was when you are looking at that on film?
The footwork of the offensive line is a tell for it, okay? And the true vertical gap scheme teaching of the double teams. Also, the running back is a good tell for it, and how the ball is hitting and what gap it's hitting are your tells on tight zone versus duo. But there are some plays where it is gray for even the seasoned vet. So it really depends on, what was called in the huddle. But, you'll see Coach Alexander up there breaking down all the details on it. But, that's how I tell the footwork of the offensive line and the true angle of force through the double teams. With duo, you're going to see a more vertical dent, whereas tight zone, you're going to see a more 45 lateral line of force with it. So that's another tail sign of it. But I'm with you, man. It's up for debate sometimes. So we go back and forth all the time. All the O-line hogs around the community go back and forth on it, chirping on it. Yeah, that's my favorite play in the game right now. And it's probably, it's dominated my Zoom talks as of late.
With that vertical double, that vertical dent in the defense, coach us through that part of it, because that part is really key to this being an attitude play and your running back who's going to get, that downhill run.
Absolutely. So starting, and we'll visualize this because obviously we don't have a board or anything, but we're running duo into an overfront with a 3 technique in the play side B gap. So I'm talking right guard and right tackle on what we call a deuce double team. So now the right guard, his footwork, he has nobody in his priority gap in the A gap. So now he has a B gap threat. He is calling the double team call. His footwork now is a timing attack step. So in my offense, the way I coach offensive line, you've really only got 3 steps. You've got a position step that puts you in position to get to a landmark. You've got a timing step, which allows time for the double team to hook up. And you've got an attack step, which is attacking at the defender. So the guard, his footwork in this situation is a timing attack step. So he's going to pick up his left foot and put it right back down to really load that shoulder up. As his attack foot, which would be his right foot in this situation, needs to aim towards the crotch of the defender, a midline of the defender, and I'm trying to attack with a down shoulder. Some guys argue flipper, uppercut. I deliver with a down shoulder, okay, to try to create the most force. You hear a lot of guys talk about same foot, same shoulder force, and that's throughout all of football. Whether you're tackling a guy, blocking a guy, running through a guy, same foot, same shoulder creates the most force. So that's what we're trying to get in there on the timing attack step. The tackle, some people will teach a gallop technique. Others will teach just a position attack style technique, which is what I teach. I teach a position step. So if I'm playing right tackle in that situation, I'm taking a 6-inch step to get me framed up with the guard for a vertical double team. And then my right foot is now attacking towards the defender, and I'm really trying to cover up the 3 technique. And we want to now, the down shoulder by the guard should lift him, and the play action attack drive from the tackle should now work that vertical. Okay. And now once you get into that situation where you've now pried the 3 technique up and stolen his power angles and are really trying to drive him vertical, now it becomes a 4 hands, 4 eyes on the linebacker. So I want 4 hands on the defender, the 3 technique in this case, and 4 eyes on the Mike linebacker in this picture. And then we talk to my guys about how we're going to now escape the double team once we deliver him to the lap of the linebacker. And the leverage of the linebacker determines that. So you're either a one-handed player or a two-handed player in the double team, and that's how I talk about it. So if the linebacker is leveraged to your side, you're a one-handed player. So in this situation, If he was a, inside backer, inside of the 3 technique, the guard is now going to be a one-handed player, and the position attack tackle is going to be a two-handed player. If the Mike is outside of the 3 technique, now you look for the timing attack from the guard. He's going to drop his shoulder and then work to be a two-handed player because the leverage of the linebacker is now outside. So in the duo play, essentially in power, you would deuce to the Willie linebacker. In the duo play, DUO, you double up to the linebacker, who would be the Mike situated in over top of you. So things that play heavily into this, the ability to get a down shoulder, which is, I think, is a true way to move a down defensive lineman, and then the leverage of the linebacker are 2 things that play heavy in my duo play install that I think is huge for making the play go. And I really enjoy to coach my guys, and they get pretty fired up about it too. But timing attack, position attack, and get after it, man. 600 on 300. That's what we're trying to get done.
I love it, Coach. Thank you for the description there. And I know you didn't have a board, but 2 things I loved about it. One, your passion for that play definitely came through, and the way you teach it, right? I'm glad you mentioned some other ways, but there's all the variations, and it works for you guys because that's what you drill all the time.
100%. And everybody's got a different way and different, way to describe it. I love getting on these clinics and, all of these Zoom meetings with, high school, college, all levels of football, and hearing guys explain it. And you don't have to adopt their system all the way, but there's something you can take from it. They're explaining something better than you explain it, whether you want to admit it or not. And you got to go into it with an open mind, and just taking and picking and choosing little things you want to add to your repertoire is always huge for a young guy, because the worst way to, progress as a young guy is think you got it all figured out, because that's the last thing you want to do. You want to always be learning and keep an open mind to, the way you do things might not be the end all be all, and different people have different ways of doing things. And that's one thing as the offensive line community. I think there's a lot of absolutes, the only way to do this, the only way to do that. And, I think going into it with an open mind, you can really learn a lot and take different things, and make sure you make it yours, and make sure you own it, and make sure you're passionate about teaching it. And if you're not, you probably need to change it or learn more about it and find a new way to deliver it, and find a way that you are passionate about it. So that's huge in the delivery for your kids as well.
Coach, before we go, I want to make sure you're able to share with coaches around the country the areas that you recruit.
Absolutely. So I'm in the Atlanta area. I'm in the state of Georgia, and I'm in Charlotte and the state of North Carolina. So that's mine. My Twitter tag, I'm sure you'll pump it out there, but at Coach C Kennedy. And if you guys got anything, if you guys want to, link up during this time on Zoom, anything like that, just follow me and reach out to me. And, we're always looking for great human beings, student athletes down here at Tulane, and really all around total packages of great people to play for us. And, we're always looking to connect with those guys, especially me in Georgia and North Carolina.
Cody, I want to thank you again for taking the time here and, sharing some things with us. And hopefully there's a few things, I'm sure there's a few things that are going to help coaches out there. So thank you.
Definitely take care. Love what you're doing, man. Keep it up.
Coaches, again, I want to remind you of what we're doing with the football development model. Please push this down to your youth coaches. I think this is a great way for you to get some organization and structure beyond what you've already done. Check it out, all of our program development for youth football at fdm.usafootball.com. Again, check out our systems for blocking, tackling, and defeating blocks at footballdevelopment.com. If you register with your email, you get your choice of 3 free videos. There's some great things in there. I think things that as you get going again, you can get into the summer and maybe make up on some things that you might have lost if you had a spring ball, if you had time here in the spring to work on football. Some great drills for all those phases of contact. If you're enjoying the podcast, please head over to iTunes or your platform and give us a 5-star rate. If you have a minute, write a review. We really appreciate it, and we will read your review on our highlight show that we do at the end of the week.